Ethan Varro had always been called worthless. In the crowded, gray colony on the distant planet of Arden 5, humans were weak, small, and slow compared to the other alien races that ruled the settlement. He was smaller than most, thinner than most, and clumsy in the physical trials that the colony forced all humans to take. Every failure made him a target of laughter, scorn, and cruel nicknames. Yet, inside him there was a quiet strength, a patience and a sharp mind that few could see. The morning began with the same cold, metallic chill that clung to the colony's steel corridors. Ethan shuffled along the crowded streets, head low, feeling the eyes of the alien guards and human workers alike. The guards were tall, plated in shimmering armor, with claws that could crush bone. Even from a distance, their presence made him shiver. Beside him, human laborers whispered cruel jokes about his latest failed trial, calling him useless and food for dragons. Dragons. The very word made most humans shiver. On Arden 5, dragons were not simple beasts. They were enormous, intelligent creatures with scales like molten metal and eyes that could see into your very thoughts. They were kept as both tools and threats. The colony leaders used them to control humans, to punish and to entertain. And today Ethan was to be their latest victim. The order had come from the Council of Elders. The weakest human must be fed, they had said, their voices cold and without mercy. Ethan knew immediately that it was him. He had failed every test. He had no strength, no speed, and no skills that the leaders could see as useful. To them he was expendable. To the dragons he was just another snack. He was dragged through the streets, chained and silent. The humans around him whispered and stared, some with pity, most with fear. Ethan did not fight. He did not shout. There was no point. Instead he kept his mind focused, thinking about what little he could do to survive. He noticed small details, the way the guards moved, the way the dragon's lair smelled even from a distance, the shadows and the cracks of the walls. Every detail could be useful. When they reached the dragon lair, the enormous gates of black metal swung open, revealing a cavern filled with heat and smoke. The ground was littered with bones and the air vibrated with deep growls. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. His mind was already working. He studied the dragon's movements, how they circled the cavern, how their eyes followed him without him even moving. There was intelligence there, a sharp awareness, and for the first time Ethan realized that these creatures were not mindless monsters. The guards pushed him closer, laughing cruelly. "Try not to get eaten before your turn," one sneered. But Ethan noticed something strange. The dragons paused. Their massive heads tilted, and their eyes, glowing in green and gold, watched him with curiosity rather than hunger. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, a connection, subtle but undeniable, like they were trying to read him. Ethan thought fast. He had no weapons, no strength, and no backup. But humans had something aliens often overlooked: thought, reasoning, and courage in the face of fear. He stood as straight as his thin frame would allow, and even in chains, he faced the dragon's gaze without flinching. It was a small act, but it made a difference. The largest dragon stepped forward. Its scales shimmered like liquid silver, and its eyes were sharp as knives. Ethan could feel its mind probing him, testing him. He kept breathing slowly, focusing on each breath, each movement. He did not scream. He did not plead. He only let his mind reach out quietly, trying to communicate without words. He showed no fear. He showed thought. He showed awareness. Other humans would have screamed and begged. Others would have panicked, thrashing until they were torn apart. But Ethan did not. Something in the dragon's intelligence responded to that calm. The elder dragon's tail swept the ground, sending sparks into the cavern, and for a moment silence ruled the lair. The guards muttered among themselves. "Maybe he'll die fast," one said. But Ethan had a small, almost invisible smile. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew that humans could survive in ways others did not understand. Courage was a weapon that didn't need muscle. Ethan was alone, surrounded by dragons far larger and stronger than he could ever imagine. He was called worthless, powerless, and soon he was meant to be food. But deep inside, he felt something he had never felt before, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive. Maybe he could turn the impossible into something extraordinary. The largest dragon let out a low rumble like a question. Ethan raised his chin slightly. He did not understand what the dragon wanted, but he knew one thing: fear would kill him faster than any teeth or claws. He held his head high, staring into eyes that had seen centuries of battle and death. And in that moment something changed. The dragon leaned closer, sniffing the air around him. Its gaze was intense, almost thoughtful. Ethan's heart pounded, but he did not step back. He did not flinch. He knew the others saw him as worthless. He knew they had already decided he would die. But sometimes, the things people underestimate are the ones that survive. Sometimes, the smallest human could stand against the greatest dragons. And perhaps, just perhaps, a worthless human could change everything. The cavern was enormous. Flames flickered along jagged walls, casting long shadows that twisted like living things. Ethan's chains clinked as he stepped forward, the sound echoing through the hollow space. The smell of sulfur and smoke burned his nose, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. Every step he took was careful, measured. One wrong move could mean instant death. Dragons filled the lair. They were massive, easily 10 times taller than any human, with scales that shimmered in colors Ethan had no names for. Their wings were folded against their bodies, but the tips scraped the ground, sending sparks into the air. They did not roar or attack immediately. Instead, they moved with a strange intelligence, circling him, watching, judging. Their eyes glowed with green, gold, and deep red light, tracking every twitch of his fingers, every flicker of his gaze. The largest dragon stepped forward first. Its head was higher than the cavern roof, and its snout glistened with moisture. Its gaze fixed on Ethan, not with hunger but with an almost strange curiosity. Ethan felt like the dragon could see inside his mind, reading every thought, every fear, every hope. He swallowed hard and forced himself to stand tall. I won't scream, he whispered to no one, more to himself than the creatures around him. He clenched his fists in the chains and tried to appear steady, calm. The dragon cocked its massive head, tilting it as if to say, "We shall see." Ethan noticed the smaller dragons moving behind the giant. They were younger, their scales brighter and less scarred. They watched him closely, some shifting nervously, others laying low, waiting. There were at least a dozen in the lair, all breathing low rumbles that vibrated through the floor. Their presence was terrifying, but Ethan forced his fear into focus. Fear would kill him faster than claws or teeth. One of the smaller dragons hissed sharply, a warning, but the giant did not react. Ethan realized that the leader was testing him. The dragon did not want to kill him outright. It wanted to know what kind of human he was. That thought surprised him. No one had ever waited to see who he was before acting. He took a slow step forward, careful to keep his hands visible. "I am not strong," he said quietly, "but I can think. I can see. I can learn." His voice was calm, steady. There was no pleading, no begging, only truth. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the cavern was silent except for the sound of flames. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. The largest dragon lowered its head closer to him, sniffing the air. Sparks flew as its claws scraped the stone, but it did not strike. Ethan held his breath, waiting, but he did not move away. He did not flinch. Then, without warning, the dragon's eyes softened slightly. It was not approval. He did not think dragons were capable of human emotions, but it was something close. A recognition of intelligence. Ethan realized that, in its own way, the dragon had decided he was not simply food. Not yet. The smaller dragons shifted again, some leaning forward, some crouching as if ready to spring. Ethan noticed that one of the young dragons had a wounded wing, its tip bent awkwardly. A spark of empathy rose in him, a human instinct that had been buried by fear and scorn. He inched closer carefully, his chains dragging lightly on the ground. "I can help," he whispered. "I know how to fix injuries. Please, let me try." The giant dragon did not respond, but it allowed him to approach. Ethan's hands shook, not from fear but from hope. He examined the young dragon's wing carefully. Using strips torn from his own clothing and some small tools he had hidden in his satchel, he worked quickly, binding the wing as best he could. The young dragon hissed but did not fight. It let him finish. When he stepped back, the elder dragon lowered its massive head in what Ethan could only interpret as approval. Other dragons murmured, small growls of acknowledgement. Ethan realized something extraordinary. The dragons respected his courage and his mind. He had survived the first test not by strength, but by intelligence and empathy. The guards outside the cavern muttered among themselves. "He won't last long," one said. "Dragons aren't tamed by words." But Ethan knew better. He had seen a spark of something the colony leaders could never understand. Humans were underestimated, but humans could survive when others could not imagine a way. Ethan's mind raced. He had no weapons, no armor, no allies. Yet he had something far stronger than what the colony could see: courage, curiosity, and the ability to think under pressure. The dragons were enormous, terrifying, and powerful, but he could communicate with them in ways the other humans never could. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt alive. He was no longer just a worthless human. He was a human with purpose, facing creatures that could have ended him in an instant, yet choosing to observe, to learn, to survive. The thought filled him with determination. If he could survive this, he could change everything. The elder dragon rumbled again, low and deep. Ethan took a step closer, keeping his voice steady. "I am not your enemy," he said. "I will not hurt you. I only wish to understand." The dragon's eyes flicked to the others, then back to him. Sparks flew from its claws as it shifted its massive body, a slow motion that seemed deliberate, as if it was deciding Ethan's fate. Ethan held his breath. The humans outside had called him worthless. They had laughed at him, abandoned him, given him his food. But here in the dragon lair, something had changed. His courage, his calm mind, and his empathy had bought him a chance. A chance to survive. A chance to prove that even a human considered weak could stand against dragons. A chance to show the universe that courage mattered more than size, more than strength, more than fear. And in that cavern of fire, smoke, and shadows, Ethan realized that the story of the worthless human was just beginning. Ethan had survived the first meeting with the dragons, but he knew this was only the beginning. The cavern was massive, filled with firelight and shadows, and dragons of all sizes moved around him. Some watched him closely, others curled up, ignoring him. None attacked. That alone was a miracle. He took a deep breath and studied the lair. There were tunnels leading deeper into the cavern, piles of bones from previous prey, and signs that dragons were not only hunters but builders, thinkers, and protectors of something. Among the bones, Ethan noticed several eggs, glowing faintly in the firelight. Their shells were fragile but beautiful. Young dragons slept nearby, their bodies curved protectively around the eggs. A thought struck him. If the dragons trusted him enough, maybe he could help them. Maybe he could earn more than survival. He could earn trust. And with trust came safety. The young dragon with the wounded wing shuffled uncomfortably. Ethan stepped closer. Carefully he inspected the wing again. "It's healing," he whispered. "But you need food." He looked around and found some dried meat that had been left near the dragon nests. Slowly he approached, holding the meat with outstretched hands. The young dragon sniffed, then cautiously ate. Ethan stepped back and nodded to the elder dragon. The giant's eyes narrowed, then softened, almost as if it approved. For hours Ethan moved carefully among the dragons. He observed their behaviors, learning their moods, how they communicated, how they protected each other. Every time a dragon hissed or flared its wings, he took a step back. Every time one lowered its head or moved closer, he learned a little more. Night came, or at least the dim glow of the planet's distant sun faded, and the cavern grew darker. Ethan felt a pang of hunger and fatigue, but he pushed it aside. Survival depended on attention, not weakness. Then he noticed movement near one of the eggs. A small rock slide had loosened above, and stones threatened to crush the eggs. Without thinking, Ethan sprang forward. He rolled under the rocks, using his body to shield the eggs as best he could. His hands dug into the stone, moving fragments away. Sparks flew from the cavern walls as some stones scraped the ground, and the dragons roared in alarm. Ethan felt the heat and smelled smoke, but he kept moving. By the time the rocks settled, the eggs were safe, and Ethan was bruised and bleeding but alive. The elder dragon stepped forward, massive claws clicking on the stone floor. It lowered its head close to Ethan, its hot breath washing over him. Ethan expected a strike, but none came. Instead, the dragon nudged him gently, an acknowledgement that he had saved something precious. The smaller dragons murmured around him, and even the injured young dragon stepped closer, nudging him with its snout. Ethan realized something incredible. He had earned their respect. Not through strength, not through aggression, but through courage, quick thinking, and care. Days passed, though time in the cavern felt strange. Ethan learned to move among the dragons without fear. He discovered that each dragon had a personality. Some were fierce, some cautious, some curious. They seemed to understand him, though he could not speak their language. Simple gestures, small acts, and calm presence were enough. The human guards outside the lair were still watching, expecting him to fail. But Ethan had learned something important. The dragons were stronger than the colony realized, but humans had their own kind of strength. Courage, cleverness, and empathy were weapons in their own right. One day the colony sent a drone to attack the cavern. It fired energy beams, hoping the dragons would kill Ethan in the chaos. But the dragons moved quickly, circling him, shielding him, using their massive wings to block the attacks. Ethan noticed how their movements created patterns, almost like they were following his unspoken commands. He understood then that trust could become power. He smiled faintly, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. Humans had been called weak, useless, expendable. But here, in the dragon lair, his mind and courage mattered more than size or claws. He began to realize that he could do more than survive, he could lead. Ethan also began to notice the dragon's weaknesses. They were intelligent but isolated. They had no leader strong enough to unite them. Some were injured, some were young, some were unsure. If he could gain their trust fully, if he could guide them, perhaps he could change the balance of power. Humans had been underestimated for centuries. Why not turn that underestimation into strength? At night, Ethan sat near the firelight, chains removed, and looked at the dragons sleeping nearby. He touched the ground gently, feeling the vibration of their presence. They were dangerous, yes, but not mindless. They were beings with thought, feeling, and need. And he could meet them, not as prey but as an equal in his own way. Ethan understood something most humans never realized. Survival alone was not enough. To thrive, he needed trust, strategy, and courage combined. And he had all three. By the end of the week, the human guards had stopped trying to interfere. The colony assumed he would be dead by now. But Ethan was alive. Not just alive, he was becoming something more. A human who could think, act, and survive in a place where dragons ruled. A human who could earn respect through courage, intelligence, and empathy. And in the quiet moments, when the cavern was still except for the soft breathing of the dragons, Ethan began to dream. He dreamed not of escape, not of survival, but of change. Perhaps one day humans would not be weak. Perhaps one day humans would be leaders. And if he could survive here, if he could earn the dragon's trust, maybe, just maybe, he could become something far greater than anyone had ever imagined. The worthless human had begun to prove his worth. The colony leaders had not forgotten Ethan. They watched from a distance, angry and confused. How had the worthless human survived so long in the dragon lair? Rumors of his survival spread among the humans in the colony, whispers of disbelief and hope mixed together. Some laughed, some feared, but all wondered the same thing. How could one weak human survive where many stronger ones had failed? Ethan, for his part, did not waste time worrying about the colony. He had spent days learning the dragons' habits, understanding their movements, their moods, and their strengths. He had discovered that while the dragons were powerful, they were not united. Some were old and cautious, others young and reckless, and no one dragon led them all. That was a weakness, and an opportunity. One morning, a patrol of alien guards entered the outskirts of the dragon lair, expecting Ethan to be gone. They carried weapons and wore cruel expressions, ready to finish what they had started. Ethan had anticipated this. He had noticed the patrols for days, their patterns, their weaknesses. He moved quietly among the dragons, whispering gestures and commands, guiding them with careful signals. The dragons responded. Young dragons blocked entrances, elder dragons flared their wings to intimidate, and Ethan's small movements coordinated them like a conductor leading an orchestra. When the patrol came close, the dragons moved as one, a blur of scales and fire. The humans hiding in the back of the patrol shouted in fear as flames licked the ground, smoke filled the air, and the enormous beasts roared. Ethan stayed calm, guiding them, moving with a confidence that surprised even himself. 4 hours he directed them, dodging attacks and setting traps with the dragon's help. Rocks fell, flames rose, and the patrol had no chance. By the time it was over, the colony guards had retreated, battered and humiliated. Ethan stood among the dragons, breathing hard, watching them settle back to rest. They no longer just tolerated him, they followed him. This victory was more than survival. It was proof that humans could fight in ways no one expected. Ethan realized that courage, intelligence, and leadership mattered far more than brute strength. The colony had underestimated humans for centuries. They would pay for that mistake. Word of Ethan's deeds spread among the hidden humans of the colony. Quiet workers and overlooked children whispered stories of the human who tamed dragons, daring to hope that maybe humans were not weak. A spark of rebellion began to ignite. Ethan's survival and courage inspired others. Even though they were frightened, they began to see the possibility of standing against the colony's tyranny. Ethan noticed a pattern in the dragons' behavior. They were loyal, but they could be guided. He began practicing more than survival, he practiced strategy. He placed dragons at key points in the lair, training them to respond to his signals without fear or confusion. He found creative ways to use their size, strength, and intelligence to counter the colony's tactics. Slowly he became a leader, not through fear but through guidance, trust, and coordination. One day, while exploring a tunnel deep in the cavern, Ethan discovered a hidden supply of the colony's weapons and supplies. He realized this could help him prepare for larger attacks. both for the dragon's protection and for the humans he hoped to free. He devised clever traps, using the environment and the dragon's abilities to create a defense that no patrol could penetrate without serious risk. The colony leaders, growing desperate, tried sending more soldiers, bigger weapons, even experimental machines designed to hunt dragons. Every attempt failed. Every time, the dragons, guided by Ethan, anticipated the attack and neutralized it. The humans watching from hiding began to talk openly now. Perhaps the worthless human was not worthless at all. Perhaps he was extraordinary. Ethan's confidence grew, but he never let it turn to arrogance. He knew the colony had more resources and more soldiers than he could imagine. A single mistake could mean death for him and the dragons. He trained, studied, and observed constantly. The dragons responded to his leadership naturally. They seemed to understand that he was different. That he had earned their trust not with fear, but with courage, intelligence, and care. Then came the day of the largest assault. The colony sent a full squadron of soldiers, armored and armed with energy weapons, ready to slaughter the dragons and retrieve Ethan. The lair shook as the squad entered, their weapons firing, alarms blaring. But Ethan was ready. The dragons moved with perfect coordination, circling the soldiers, forcing them into narrow tunnels where their technology was less effective. Rocks fell, fire roared, and chaos filled the tunnels. Ethan guided the dragons with precise gestures, staying close but safe, watching as they executed the plan he had designed. The soldiers panicked. Some tried to flee only to find the tunnels blocked. Others froze as the elder dragons loomed above them. It was a battle unlike any the colony had expected. One human had organized the dragons, a species they considered wild and uncontrollable, and they could not defeat him. By the end, the surviving soldiers retreated, beaten and humiliated. The dragons roared in victory, shaking the cavern with their voices. Ethan stood among them, breathing heavily, bruised but alive. He realized something incredible. The humans who had once called him worthless were watching now, secretly inspired. A rebellion had begun, not just among the dragons but in the hearts of humans who had seen what courage could achieve. Ethan looked around the cavern. The dragons followed him not as beasts but as allies. And for the first time he felt the weight of possibility. One human, considered weak and useless, had not only survived but led a revolt against impossible odds. Perhaps the colony had misjudged humans entirely. Perhaps the future belonged to those who dared to stand when all others fled. And in that moment Ethan understood something he had never believed before. Courage was stronger than fear, intelligence stronger than muscle, and even a single human could change the course of history. The worthless human was no longer worthless. The colony had finally realized that Ethan was more than a worthless human. Reports of dragons attacking patrols, soldiers retreating, and humans quietly helping had reached the Council of Elders. They were furious and desperate. But Ethan had not waited for them to act. He had prepared and the dragons were ready. Ethan stood at the entrance of the dragon lair, looking out over the battlefield. Smoke rose from the scorched ground where the last patrol had fled. Dragons of all sizes circled above, their wings casting shadows over the humans who had begun to gather secretly. They had seen courage and intelligence in Ethan, and now they wanted to follow him. He was not just surviving. He was leading. The elder dragon, massive and silver-scaled, landed beside him. Its eyes locked with Ethan's and for a moment, the human felt a strange understanding pass between them. The dragon lowered its head, brushing his shoulder lightly with its snout, a silent acknowledgement that Ethan was their guide, their leader. He felt a rush of pride and responsibility. Ethan raised his hand to the humans gathered at the edge of the lair. "We can fight together," he said. "We can change our world. We are not weak. We are not worthless. We are humans and we can lead." His voice carried across the battlefield, firm, calm, and full of courage. The humans hesitated, looking at the dragons and then at him. Slowly they nodded. They trusted him. The first attack came soon after. The colony sent their strongest forces, thinking sheer numbers would overwhelm dragons. But Ethan had planned for this. Using the terrain, the dragon's strength, and clever strategies, he directed every movement. Young dragons blocked paths, elder dragons swooped from above, and Ethan guided humans to safe spots where they could assist without being caught in the fire and chaos. The battle was long. The air was filled with smoke, fire, and the roar of dragons. Soldiers fell back again and again, unable to anticipate the strategies of one human and his dragon allies. Ethan moved among them, calm and precise, signaling with gestures and calling out instructions. Every step was calculated. Every choice mattered. During the fight, Ethan noticed a group of humans trapped near the center. Without hesitation, he ran toward them, dodging energy blasts and leaping over burning rocks. The dragons covered his path, roaring warnings at the colony soldiers. He reached the humans, guided them to safety, and together they moved toward the edge of the battlefield. Courage was not just his own, it was spreading to everyone around him. Finally, after hours of fighting, the colony forces began to retreat. Their confidence shattered, their weapons useless against coordinated dragons and inspired humans, they fled the battlefield. Ethan stood in the smoke and fire, breathing heavily but alive. The dragons gathered around him, forming a protective circle. They no longer saw him as prey, as a weak human, they saw him as their leader, their king. Humans began to cheer quietly at first, then louder. They had witnessed something extraordinary. One human, small and underestimated, had survived impossible odds, led dragons into battle and protected them all. Ethan looked around at the humans and dragons alike. He realized that this was not the end. This was only the beginning. Together they could change the colony, the world, and maybe even the galaxy. The elder dragon nudged him again, more forcefully this time, as if to say, "You are one of us now." Ethan placed his hand on its massive snout, feeling the heat and the power. "We will lead together," he said. "Not as masters, not as slaves, but as allies." The dragon's deep rumble answered him, and the younger dragons circled, their wings flashing like fire in the sunlight. Ethan knew the colony would try to regain control. They would send armies again. But the humans had hope now. They had seen courage triumph over fear, intelligence over strength, and one human leading the impossible. Ethan understood that the true power of humans was not their size, their muscles, or their weapons. It was their mind, their heart, and their courage to stand when no one believed in them. Over the next weeks, Ethan worked with the dragons and humans to create a new order. He taught humans to observe, to think, to strategize. He helped dragons understand that humans could be allies, not enemies. Slowly, the colony's oppression weakened. The leaders could not control either dragons or humans anymore. The worthless human had changed the rules entirely. Ethan stood on a high ledge in the lair, looking out over the colony. Dragons soared above, humans moved freely below, and the sun of Arden 5 painted the world in gold and red. He smiled faintly. He remembered the day he had been called worthless, chained, and sent to die. Now he was alive, stronger, respected, and leading not just dragons but humans who had once doubted themselves. One of the younger dragons landed near him, nudging his hand with its snout. "You've made us strong together," Ethan said softly. "We will protect each other and we will lead." He looked out at the horizon, feeling the warmth of hope in his chest. The worthless human had become a king. Not a king by birth, not a king by strength, but a king by courage, intelligence, and heart. The colony, the dragons, and all who had underestimated humans now knew the truth. Even one human could change the course of history. And as Ethan watched the dragons soar into the sky, he knew that this was only the first of many victories. The story of the worthless human would be remembered not for his weakness, but for his courage, his mind, and his heart. Ethan Varro, once called worthless, had become more than anyone could imagine. He had become their king.